Hello, you're on VTV with Into Vietnam Weekend Bulletin, which summarizes the most outstanding economic events in the past week. Let's take a look at the headline first. The World Bank sees Vietnam gross domestic product to rise 5.3% in 2013. Credit institutions forecast the October CPI to rise by 0.76% on month. And Mr. Simon Andrews, the International Finance Corporation Regional Manager for Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos and Thailand, will join our business talk today to talk about the prospect of resolving their debts with the participation of multi-sites like the VMC, banks, AMCs and international investors. Let's begin with this week's figure. The World Bank said in its updated economic report on its Asia-Pacific region on October 7th, in Hanoi, Vietnam gross domestic product is forecast to grow modestly by 5.3% and 5.4% in 2013-2014 respectively. According to the World Bank, the sluggish growth of economies in the world and the slow economic restructuring also make Vietnam's GDP growth slowed. The growth is in the lowest level since 1980s. In a prolonged slow growth, GDP growth fell from 6.4% in 2010 to 6.2% in 2011 and 5.2% in 2012. In the first half of this year, nearly 29,000 businesses were closed or suspended operation, that is 10.5% higher than the same period in 2012. The Ho Chi Minh City recorded an impressive economic growth rate of 10.3% in the third quarter of 2013, up 0.7% against the same period last year. The city index of industrial production in the first 9 months of this year rose by 6% year-on-year, thanks to an expansion in production scale. Leather and related products, medicine, rubber and plastic were among the industry with high year-on-year growth rates of 10.9%, 11.2% and 10% respectively. Despite promising signals, the city still faces many difficulties due to the turmoil in the global economy, large inventories, and a stagnant property market. In the remaining months of 2013 and the following years, local authorities must drastically implement socio-economic development measures, with priority to be given to solving difficulties for businesses.
International arrivals to Vietnam continue to show a strong growth, predicting a historical high for the destination in 2013, as growth reached almost 10% over the first 3 quarters of 2013. Vietnam tourism continues to grow strongly, with road arrivals and air arrivals booming. Road traffic grew by 31%, representing a market share of 17.7%. This is mostly due to further improvements of highway infrastructures and more cross-border checkpoints. Air transport continued to show growth, even if the rate remains below national average. Growth in air transport reached 7.1%. According to the Vietnam National Tourism Administration, total international arrivals continue to be driven by China, Russia and Korea, a story which is repeated across most Southeast Asian destinations. Just particular is the progression of Russian travelers in the year time. During the first 9 months of 2013, Russians represent close to 210,000 visitors, up by 65.9%. In September alone, Russian arrivals jumped by over 105% compared to a year earlier. Most major European markets are losing steam this year, except the UK, Spain, Norway and the Benelux. Growth from these countries remain, however, inferior to 10%. However, large source markets such as France or Germany are recording strong decrease rates of respectively 6.7% and 23.9%. Markets from the Pacific are thriving, with New Zealand up by 20.5% and Australia by over 12%.
Coming up next is some major macroeconomic and investment news. According to data from the State Bank of Vietnam, credit institutions expect the country's October Consumer Price Index to rise by 0.76% from September. This is a survey result on credit institutions' expectation for October inflation, carried by Monetary Forecast and Statistics Department under the State Bank of Vietnam. As many as 84 out of 120 credit institutions and branches of foreign banks in Vietnam respond to the survey. These credit institutions and banks expected Vietnam this year October CPI to accelerate by 0.76% from September, lower than the increase of 1.06% in September and 0.85% in October 2012. These organizers also expected the Southeast Asian countries' inflation to touch 7% this year, lower than 7.05% expectation in the previous survey, carried from the end of August to beginning of September. The National Standing Committee organized a 22nd conference October the 11th to update on the country's socio-economic development conditions and state budget plan for 2013-2015 period. The Ministry of Planning and Investment reports in the first 9 months of this year, inflation was continued to be curbed as the government aggressively implementing policies to stabilize macroeconomy and ensure financial and monetary policies. The Consumer Price Index inched up by 4.63% from the beginning of the year, showing the lowest level in the past 4 years. This is attributed not only to the government efforts in curbing inflation, but also to robust supplies from both local production and imports, while total demand and purchasing power stay low. It's forecast that CPI in the final months of 2013 will be capped at 7%. Vietnam has also regained the steam for economic growth, and positive changes were recorded in the majority subsectors. In the first 9 months of 2013, the gross domestic product grew by 5.14%, higher than the pace at the same period last year. The number is projected at 5.4% for the whole year, lower than the target of 5.5%, but higher than the corresponding period last year. Vietnam's central bank said today it won't devalue the dong by more than 3% in 2013, as it seeks to prevent the holding of dollars and keep the money market stable. The State Bank of Vietnam devalued the dong by 1% in June by reducing the currency daily reference rate to support exports and help revive the economy. The State Bank of Vietnam says since late 2011, it has targeted to control the dong exchange rate in a manner that allowed it to weaken by no more than 1% in final months of every year. The central bank is planning for the currency to drop 2% to 3% over the whole year. According to the State Bank of Vietnam data, total assets of the entire banking industry by the end of August reached more than 5,000 trillion dong or $238.5 billion, up by 35.2 trillion dong or $1.6 billion against the previous month. Compared with December last year, the assets rose by 3.89%. The rise in total assets for the banking industry was mostly due to an increase in assets of 5.43% by state-owned banks and 0.89% in assets for commercial joint stock banks. Financial and financial leasing companies reported a decline of 1% in assets in the period. Equity of the entire banking industry also rose nearly 1.4 trillion dong or $63.59 million to 445 trillion dong or $20.2 billion by the end of August, of which state-owned banks made up 158 trillion dong or more than $7 billion and 177.8 trillion dong or $8 billion was from commercial joint stock banks. Charter capital for the entire sector also surged 3.97% from the end of July, but the capital adequacy ratio inched down to 13.66%. The ratio of short-term capital for medium and long-term loans surged from 16.84% at the end of July to 17.24% at the end of August. However, the loan-to-deposit ratio dropped to 87.42% from 87.75%, proving that credit growth is still facing challenges. In related news, the PG Bank, CSB and HSB have signed contracts to sell 800 billion dong of their destructive debts to the BMC. Its regulated banks with bad debt ratio of more than 3% are forced to sell their debts to the BMC. However, the company reveals the fear of selling debts prompted those with less than 3% to sell their debts to BMC as well. PG Bank said it sold 170 billion dong of bad loans to the BMC, with the majority of them in realty projects. HSB says to plan to sell more than 1 trillion dong to the BMC, most of which is from Habbo Bank, which merged with HSB earlier. The supporting centers for small and medium-sized enterprises in the north and the Business Development Agency and the Ministry of Planning and Investment collaborated with the Daezong Business Incubator Association to hold the 2013 Daezong Promotion Day in Hanoi, October the 8th. At the event, Korean firms set high up business opportunities in Vietnam. The conference is aimed at helping Vietnamese and South Korea's companies to seek for business and investment chances. It was joined by 9 firms from Daezong operating in IT, home electricity, safety cameras, cosmetics, and fruit, among others. The event is regarded as a good opportunity for Vietnamese and Korean companies to build cooperation. The Daezong Business Incubator Association expected the event will open more chances for business at both sides, from South Korea and Daezong as well, and hence boost economic cooperation between the two countries. Let's move on with the summary of import-export activities in the week.
According to the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, exports of crayfish are expected to reach around $1.8 billion due to high demand from export market. Despite a hike in price of the fish, many local businesses succeeded in signing a number of contracts to ship abroad until the end of this year. The crayfish export activity is the first 6 months of this year slowed down. Vietnam's crayfish exports recorded a yearly increase of 3.23% in volume, but a year-on-year decrease of 7.93% in value during the first 6 months of this year. According to the ministry, Vietnam's seafood export turnover in the first 9 months of this year reached over $4.6 billion, a year-on-year increase of 3%. According to the Vietnam Rubber Association, the rubber industry expects to bring home $4.5 billion in exports this year. Last year, the sector's total export value reached $4.26 billion. The increase in global rubber demand in recent years has encouraged Vietnam to expand its rubber farming to increase export value and improve the socio-economic situation in many localities. As a result, Vietnam has become the 5th biggest natural rubber producer in the world, with 910,000 hectares of land under rubber trees, producing 836,000 tons of rubber in 2012. The country also ranked the 4th in terms of the amount of natural rubber for export, which accounted for 10.6% of the market share in 2012. The nation's rubber tree productivity is about 1,700 tons of latex per hectare, ranking the 3rd after India and Thailand.
How small and medium-sized enterprises can get access to bank capital has long been a difficult question. In 2013, when the inflation threat is still lingering in the context of inefficient operation of the banking system, it's even more difficult for small and medium-sized enterprises to access credits. How to break the bottleneck in credits for enterprises is an issue of great concern. More in our business report.
With about 500,000 firms accounting for 98% of the total, producing more than 40% of GDP and creating above 1 million jobs every year, small and medium-sized enterprises don't only make great contribution to the national economic development, but also help eliminate hunger and reduce poverty, enhance the social stability and security. However, it's a pity that these firms are always in underprivileged position to get access to credits.
Cái khó khăn sâu hơn của doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ đã như bạn vừa nói qua là liên quan đến vấn đề là thật tín dụng của chính phủ. Mà bạn cũng biết tất cả các cái nước trên thế giới là các doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ thì thường được nhà nước hỗ trợ rất là ok. Bởi vì tại sao? Bởi vì là cái trụ cột của nền kinh tế là thường là những doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ rất nhiều. Chúng ta phân tích ở Mỹ là chúng ta sẽ thấy là những doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ đóng vai trò rất quan trọng của nền kinh tế của một đất nước đó. Chính vì thế là nếu mà theo tôi nhìn nhận thì chỉ có những chính sách từ chính phủ để phù hợp cho những doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ phát triển lên. Chứ còn bây giờ đến cá nhân những cái doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ đó thì cũng chỉ gọi là làm theo những cái chính sách của nhà nước để mà tồn tại được thôi.
According to the report by the Statistics Office, there are 670,000 new startups annually all over our country, in which nearly 202,000 firms suspend operation. The obstacles resulting in the closing are mostly difficulties in accessing credits. There is the paradox that the banks want to lend big firms, but these firms don't want to borrow money from banks. Meanwhile, SMEs who want to get loans from banks often fail to meet the bank's requirements. Small firms find it hard to get credits because the banks require many papers, procedures, and long operation period, while the demand for capital is urgent.
Sau một cái thời gian mà các cái doanh nghiệp Việt Nam đã phát triển với cái tốc độ khá cao, đã bung ra để tận dụng các cái cơ hội của thị trường. Nhưng cái sự tăng trưởng về số lượng của doanh nghiệp, sự phát triển của doanh nghiệp đã không đi đôi với lại cái chất lượng của doanh nghiệp. Cho nên phải nói là một cái bộ phận của doanh nghiệp Việt Nam, trong đó có nhiều doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ, thì cái chất lượng của doanh nghiệp không cao, cái hiệu quả sản xuất kinh doanh thấp. Mà với cái hiệu quả sản xuất kinh doanh thấp, với cái trình độ quản trị còn yếu kém thì rất khó có khả năng tiếp cận cái nguồn vốn tín dụng hiện nay, bởi vì cái điều kiện cho vay của ngân hàng rất là ngặt nghèo và cái lãi suất cho vay cũng rất là cao.
Recently, the government has directed the implementation of many solutions and policies to remove obstacles for enterprises, which are mainly tax extension, tax reduction, or interest rate reduction. However, according to businesses, the reduction of interest rate is not effective because it only meets the demand of the healthy ones, while it's not effective for most of the firms with substandard financial capacity. SMEs haven't escaped from their old debts to borrow a new one. Debt extension is the short-term solutions for the firms, but it can make them stronger. In fact, a large number of enterprises are not interested in borrowing despite lower interest rate.
Cái thông điệp rất là quan trọng đối với các doanh nghiệp Việt Nam hiện nay, kể cả những doanh nghiệp lớn đối với doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ, là phải quay trở lại, củng cố những yếu tố nền tảng của mình, nâng cao cái chất lượng quản trị, nâng cao cái tính minh bạch, tập trung đầu tư vào những lĩnh vực kinh doanh cốt lõi và phải xác định thật rõ cái chiến lược kinh doanh của mình và nâng cao được cái trình độ quản trị để đảm bảo được cái hiệu quả kinh doanh. Và chỉ trên cơ sở đảm bảo được hiệu quả kinh doanh, trên cơ sở có cái năng lực cạnh tranh thì mới có điều kiện tiếp cận được cái nguồn vốn ngân hàng và có thể cạnh tranh thắng lợi trong cái bối cảnh cạnh tranh rất là khốc liệt trong cái thời gian tới.
Trong lúc thị trường gặp khó khăn thì tất cả mọi giải pháp đều tốt. Bất cứ có ai có một cái sáng kiến gì, một cái giải pháp gì thì thị trường đều tiếp nhận, đón nhận như là một yếu tố tích cực cho thị trường. Còn việc thực hiện nó thành công đến đâu thì cũng như tất cả mọi câu chuyện khác còn đòi hỏi rất nhiều các cái sự tham gia đồng thuận của các bên hữu quan.
Experts say in order to develop sustainably, a firm needs to ensure resources, technology, ability to get access to market information, and understanding of legal issues. Meanwhile, the support from the government is quite limited. Therefore, it's necessary to choose the sectors to support firms, both in terms of capital and policies.
Local and international experts and organizations affirmed the establishment of the VMC is a positive step in clearing bad debts of bank portfolio. However, banks' restructuring process will be more effective with the participation of banks' asset management companies as well as of international investors. The statement was made by Mr. Simon Andrews, the International Finance Corporation Regional Manager for Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos and Thailand, in his interview with VITV. More to follow. thank you so much for joining our program on the IDV channel. Does the International Finance Corporation plans to buy bad debts from the VMC? And if so, what do you do with the bad debts?
I think we're a counter-cyclical investor. We're a development finance institution. Part of our role is to come in and find new ways to resolve problems such as the NPL situation that Vietnam is facing. I think it's very encouraging that the VAMC has been established. This is clearly a very positive step in the right direction. I think it's encouraging that the VAMC has made its first acquisition of NPLs. And I think it's also very encouraging the recent circular that will allow the VAMC to sell portfolios of NPLs to foreign investors. We are certainly interested in becoming a partner with Vietnam to resolve the NPL situation. We've invested in about $3.5 billion worth of NPLs globally in emerging markets. We've worked with 600 banks and asset management companies to do this, so I hope we will be able to partner with Vietnam's banks and the Vietnam Asset Management Company. Investors are interested in this market because they have specialized skills in recovering loans. And there are two ways to recover loans. One is either restructuring the loan, so you sit down with the borrower and you restructure and you agree on new terms for the payback of the loan. Or if ultimately the business is not able to generate the cash flow to pay back the loan, then the NPL manager will recover the loan. And recovering the loan means taking the collateral, enforcing the borrower's rights, and then selling that collateral, and you get your money back through the sale of that collateral.
From your point of view, what should the Vietnamese government do to encourage international corporations like the IFC to take part in resolving the problem in Vietnam?
Well, one of the challenges in Vietnam is that this is a new market. The NPL market is a new market for Vietnam, and the regulatory framework and the legal framework around the sale of loans and the recovery of loans is somewhat unclear. So if I buy a loan from a bank, it's not clear necessarily how the rights that are attached to that loan transfer to me, so I can enforce those rights. So more clarity around the legal framework for the transfer of loans or the sale of loans and how the rights transfer as well. For an investor in NPLs, it's absolutely critical that you can enforce your rights, that you actually own the loan and you have the rights as well so that you can enforce them. So a very strong legal and regulatory framework around the enforcement of rights. The other challenge for foreign investors investing in NPLs in Vietnam is if you go down the path of recovery, the second path that I mentioned, that is selling, taking ownership of the collateral and selling it, and you get your money back by selling the collateral. Most collateral is typically real estate, and it's very difficult for a foreigner to take ownership of that real estate in Vietnam and then sell it. So that's another area that would need to be addressed.
Commercial banks in Vietnam tend to hide the true number of bad debts from the media, and some international corporations say that the true number may be higher. What is your advice on commercial banks in revealing the information?
I think it's important for banks to take NPLs out of their portfolio and give it to somebody else who can manage it more effectively. Banks, their business is raising deposits and lending. They make their money on the margin between what they pay for the deposit and what they lend their money at, Banks typically don't have the resources in-house or the skill sets in-house to manage NPLs. And so if they can take the NPLs and give it to somebody who has specialist skills in managing and recovering NPLs, they can take those resources that are managing the NPLs within the bank and put them back to the bank's main business of lending. And that's important not just for the bank, it's important for the economy. Because while the banks are dealing with the NPL situation and they're not lending, That means that businesses are not investing. That means that the economy the growth in the economy is much lower. So what we've seen around the world is that countries that recognize the NPL situation very quickly, and I think Vietnam has, and then they acknowledge the level of NPLs, and then they provide solutions to address those NPLs very quickly, get them out of the banking sector. These economies bounce back to higher levels of growth very quickly.
Thank you so much for joining our program today. And wrapping up is a summary of local securities markets throughout the week. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for your attention. For comments and feedback, you can reach us by email at intovietnam@bidv.vn or give us a call at 0422208288. Goodbye for now.